Words of joy and hope. It is the first Sunday of Advent, year C, and the Gospel of Luke, chapter 21. The commentaries by Father Fernando Armelini. A good Sunday for all at the beginning of Advent. The text of the Gospel that we will hear shortly was pronounced by Jesus in the temple in the last week of his life. Luke adds that after spending the day in the temple where he taught, at dusk he retired to the Mount of Olives, and there he spent the night in the open air. The temple was one of the wonders of the world, one of the most famous and beautiful constructions. This temple was the glory of Israel, and one day, while he was in the square of the women, someone invited Jesus to contemplate this wonder. Naturally, they expected from Jesus to share the joy of the people in the contemplation of this wonder that there was the temple of Herod. But in fact, Jesus' response surprised everyone. Of all this, there will be no stone on stone. The destruction of the temple meant for the disciples the end of their hopes, of all their certainties, including religious certainties, because the presence of the Lord was there. The God of Israel, the invincible God, the one who destroyed the army of Egypt. Therefore, the temple could not collapse. Therefore, faced with the affirmation of Jesus, they were disconcerted. If there will not be a stone left over from the temple, what are all our hopes for? It is in front of this surprise that these words of Jesus produces in the disciples the reason why Jesus introduced a surprising announcement. A world that was about to end, that must end, but you must be happy, not sad, because a world is about to be born like the one that God wanted. A force capable of destroying and eliminating that negative germ will enter the world that has led to that sad world full of injustices which we are living. Let us listen to this announcement. There will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and on earth nations will be in dismay, perplexed by the roaring of the sea and the waves. People will die of fright in anticipation of what is coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. We are preparing for the celebration of Christmas, and everybody should talk about joy, feast, singing, peace, love. But instead, the words of Jesus that we just heard seems that they induce fear, and therefore seem not to adapt to the liturgical time that we are preparing to live. If we get scared, it is because we have not understood the language used by Jesus. Jesus introduced his message using an apocalyptic language. And apocalyptic does not mean catastrophic, although the images suggest a catastrophe. Apocalyptic means reveal, remove the veil on a mystery that exists in the world. What is this mystery? They are the things of always that we know, the mystery of pain, why the injustices, why the wars, why the violence on the weakest, the oppression, the misery in front of the excessive use of things, the waste. I think we have all put these questions once. Did God make this world good, really? Certainly God has done it well. And this mysterious situation that leads us to these questions, God has not created them. But will this world that is moved by a negative force last forever? Jesus leads to this. What is it that leads to this situation that are unbearable and intolerable? This is a question that was asked in the time of Jesus and that we also put today. Is this world going to last forever, or is it destined to disappear and leave its place for a world completely new? The world that God has wanted since the first moment of its creation. And the words of Jesus want to remove this veil. Jesus uses apocalyptic language that we will now try to decode. First of all, he speaks of signs in the sun, in the moon, in the stars. The peoples of the ancient Middle East contemplated the firmament more than we do today, and they organized their lives observing the course of the stars and the regular monitoring of the seasons. They looked to heaven more than we do today. We look at it from our cell phones, but they watched the firmament, and both for them and for us. If there is something that we imagine which is stable, immutable, it is the regular movement of the stars and the planets of the firmament. It does not occur to any one of us that tomorrow the sun does not appear in the east punctually. So says also the psalmist on Psalm 72 when composing his epithalamion. Epithalamion is a song or a poem for a sovereign on the day of his inauguration. What does he augur the king? May your kingdom last like the sun, because the sun lasts forever, like the moon for centuries, and let there be prosperity until the moon is gone. The moon does not end because the stars of the sky are stable, immutable. So, what does Jesus want from using these images? There will be signs on the sun, the moon, and the stars. The prophets described the world very well. A world that all of us wanted to end. They talked about the world made of wars, of injustice, of violence for the wicked, a world supported by social order that is actually a disorder. We also today think that this world is stable, immovable. How many times we have felt to say nothing will change. The powers of evil are very strong. Think of the economy, advertising that sells lies, or the fake news. And they do it in 1,000 ways with all the digital instruments to communicate their lies. And it makes us want to drop our arms. This world will not change. This is the effective image that Jesus introduces. What appears as immutable, immovable, God will change it. He will cast it out because he will introduce into a world a force much more powerful than the forces of evil. And it will be the end not only of social injustices, but also the end of a religious structure that everyone thought would last forever, because it was a holder of divine authority. That religion that instilled in the people a commercial relationship with God. What was the religion of Jesus' time, which he condemns and says that this religion is over, this way of relating to God? Okay, they went to the temple. They offered sacrifices to the Lord, and as they offered sacrifices, then they hoped to be favored. They observed the commandments. Then the Lord had to bless them, their family, and so forth. It was a commercial relationship with God. The face of the Father announced by Jesus and reproduced perfectly in his face does not want to do anything with this kind of relationship, because Jesus came to speak to us to announce the joy of an unconditional love from God. God does not want anything from us. We should only receive these gifts, and if we receive them, then we will be happy. The only thing that God wants from us is our joy. This is what Jesus announces. The offuscation of a susceptible, vindictive God who demands obedience, who does not admit excuses in case someone does not follow his orders, otherwise it triggers punishments. With this image of the end of the ancient world, Jesus says that a new force has entered the world, which is his spirit, the spirit of love that overcomes the negative force of hatred, of selfishness. The new world will no longer be regulated by these forces who have dominated until his coming. Then, after the signs of heaven, it goes to the signs of the earth, always with apocalyptic images. Perplexed by the roaring of the sea and the waves, okay, do not panic. It is an announcement of great joy. The sea was a symbol of negative forces. In the sea were the monsters that fought against life and against the project of God's love. What does the sea do when this divine force arrives? It can only be agitated trying to resist, to perpetuate the ancient world. It will not be able to do it. And this conflict between the forces of good and the forces of evil will generate anguish and fear, even among the righteous, because people will die of fright in anticipation of what is coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken, says the Gospel. We also have a little fear, because we know that there is a very big conflict between the forces of the old world, which we know them very well, and the new force, which is the Spirit, who acts in those who receive the proposal of a new world and a new man initiated by Jesus. It also gives us a little fear because we ask ourselves, who will win? And many times we think that the forces of good will lose, that they will be defeated. With this image, Jesus wants to give us the announcement, the promise that the forces of good will prevail. He wants to avoid the danger, which is very current and concrete, that even those who have adhered to his proposal of man and new world drop their arms to resign. No, the new world has begun, and there has been a passage between two epochs in history, the passage from the ancient world to the new world. The passage from the inhuman world to the truly human world had already been announced by the prophet Daniel, and Jesus alludes to this prophecy by applying it to himself. Let us listen. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. But when these things begin to happen, stand erect and raise your heads, because your redemption is at hand. In chapter 7, the prophet Daniel presents the old world as a wild world. In fact, the images are of the succession of the kingdoms of the empires that are the lion, leopard, that shattered those who were before them and then establish a power that is more beastly. In the book of the prophet Daniel, it is announced that the kingdom of the Son of Man will come at last. Son of Man in Hebrew means simply man, a true man that fully realized human identity. The selfish, violent, exploitative, dissolute man is unhuman, is bestial. And this is the old world whose end was already announced by the prophet Daniel. This is what Jesus announces: the triumph of the human over the inhuman. In fact, it says, when all this starts happening, and we must be prepared to receive the signs of the new world, because we have been frightened by the victories of the ancient world of evil. We must be vigilant and know how to welcome the presence of the new world. The question we ask ourselves is this: how can we place ourselves before this revelation made by Jesus? Because we can get involved in the story of God, or we can stay on the sidelines. What does Jesus say we do? The first thing he says, straighten up. The Greek verb is very important, anakipto, which means you who bend your head, who lean for shame, for fear, because you are crushed, straighten up. This verb has been used by the evangelist Luke when talking about the stooped woman who walked always hunched. And then it is the image of the woman that always in history has had to bow her head. Jesus says, the new world has begun. Straighten up, all the hunched. Do not resign yourselves to the slavery to which you have been subjugated. Slavery that comes also from pagan cultures, traditions, and fashions. No. If you are slaves of these things, straighten up. Do not resign yourself to lower your head, perhaps because of some painful history, memory, even of sin, fragility, of mistakes made. Do not resign yourself. Stand upright, because God has loved you just as you are. Second thing you should do, raise up your head. Look up. Think of the meaning of your existence. Do not duck your head on material realities that are important, but they are not the absolute. Lift up your head. Look at the meaning of your existence, because the day of your liberation has arrived. When these things begin to happen, get ready, because you must be attentive to the signs of the new world and become part of this new reality. And now Jesus makes two recommendations. Let us listen to it. Beware that your hearts do not become drowsy from carousing and drunkenness and the anxieties of daily life, and that they catch you by surprise like a trap. Be vigilant at all times and pray that you have the strength to escape the tribulation that are imminent and to stand before the Son of Man. Listen to these recommendations made by Jesus, and in the waiting time, and how we must make ourselves present in this new world that He has begun. The first of these recommendations is not to be attentive to the evil that others do. Be attentive to yourselves. First of all, to be vigilant about yourself, because there are dangers and risks that can happen. The first of these risks is that your heart is stunned. That is, it loses the religious and human sensibility about the message that Jesus has given. As we live in the world and are surrounded by fashions, a logic that is not of the gospel, we can also induce ourselves little by little to think, to do at least a little, as they all do. Jesus says, watch yourself. It will be a problem if we fully integrate in the present in material things to the point of not leaving space for the search for values of the meaning of life and end up sliding towards the way of thinking and doing what everybody does. Watch yourself and always keep in touch with my word. Second danger, vice, drunkenness. What does this image mean? We are aware of all that provokes you, everything that makes you lose contact with reality. The one who drinks, the one who gets drunk, lives in an illusory world, not in a real world. And these days that comes from material things may even be a professional success because you no longer think of anything else. Or they can be all the illusory, ephemeral realities in the mind, in the midst of which we live. And this is presented with this image, everything that stuns us, make us drunk. And when you are drunk, it is better that you don't go shopping around because you will be cheated. If we are stunned when we make these choices, for example, by the advertising world, by the way of thinking, of speeches, of television advertisements, of the junk programs, we will also end up being stunned and drunk by all these, and then we will make wrong choices. Also, the worries of life. It is not that material things are not important, but they are not the only ones. Concerns for biological life cannot absorb all our interest. If one is folded over earthly realities, as if they were the only and the absolute, then the fair value will not be given to the things of life. Then Jesus continues saying, be attentive, because you can fall victim to a trap that falls on you. Trap means something that catches you, that will not let you move. Jesus calls our attention because this can be trapping us in options that then do not let us think, do not let us act and choose well in our life. Keep in mind, because in the end you can live and be chained to an imaginary world, because the real world, the right choices, are not revealed immediately. The one who has chosen well in life sees it in the end. It is an invitation to wisdom, to know how to read the meaning of history, to know how to choose the objective, to know which is the direction that there is to follow today in life. And the last recommendation is prayer. Prayer means being constantly in contact and in dialogue with the Lord to be able to make all the options according to what he suggests. This is the prayer. And Jesus concludes by saying that when the Lord comes into our lives with his word and with his light, he wants to find us standing before the Son of Man. The Son of Man is the proposal of man that Jesus makes. And in fact, we listen to the proclamation of the gospel standing up to be ready to receive his proposal and to follow it. We are waiting for the coming of the Lord, and we are preparing to receive him while standing, ready to follow what he tells us, because that is how we will be with him, builders of a new world and a new man. I wish everyone a good Sunday and a good week.